The Catholic Morning Show.
Good morning, one and all. 16 minutes after the hour, the Catholic Morning Show is grateful to have you. Bo Bonner, Elise Kerr, Brady Grimm, Aiden Pugh, all of us very happy that you're joining us here as we are rolling along in Holy Week. Again, April 1st, no fooling here. We are happy to have you with us. On the second half of the show, we'll have Steve Ray, author, speaker, Jerusalem Jones, as he often gets called. We'll be talking to him about the crucifixion and the Eucharist. Right now, let's turn to our first guest of the day. She's back, Connie Hill, local Catholic content creator. You can find her at godstoddler.com. You can also check in on her Wonder blog, where you get to Heavenly Nuggets Corner. Connie, thank you for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me again.
It's a wonderful time to have you. Of course, when we had you the first time, we talked about you're a convert.
Yes.
And so for converts like you and me, Easter week is always really special. Yes. I'm coming up on 20 years this Easter. You're coming up on 5?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we only had like cool little badges, right?
Oh, yeah, RCIA alumni.
Oh, yeah, you do. Yeah, she has an RCIA alumni shirt, so very apropos there. Just to set the scene, because one of the things we wanted to talk about was a theme you picked up at the very end of our interview with you last time. So you're a convert from Protestantism, but before that from Asiatic religions and stuff that you can explain real quick. Mm-hmm. And I think that will get us into what we wanted to talk today about daily spiritual warfare battles. So go ahead to you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Connie, and to all those that are new and listening, I come from an ancestral worship background as being a Chinese Asian American. For us, we lived heavily in the book of Leviticus, the book of Numbers, where sacrifices was actually meal cooking, except it was placed on an altar and we were not allowed to touch it. The ancestors drank tea, and I, being 5 years old, I'm like, obviously it's working because it's not evaporation, right? And so when mom and dad passes away, we better burn paper mache houses that look like houses and make sure they're happy on the other side of the world, or in the spirit realm, so that we can get access to our blessings. So it's not God, it's ancestral worship and paganism.
Yeah. And so when people, maybe, most of our listeners, if you're just talking about like by average percentage, mm-hmm. if they're converts and things like this, they might convert from, for being knowns. They don't really have mm-hmm. anything, or they're Protestant or things like this. So mm-hmm. the sort of language and idea about what religion is a sort of narrow box for folks that come from a very, of course, worldwide, right? Catholics, billion over people in very different cultural contexts. So what is it like to encounter Christianity coming from, like you said, ancestor worship and what we would call more older pagan ways of understanding the interaction of the spirit world and our world?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And quite frankly, at first you're like, wow, it's so free. Mm. But then as you dig into the Word of God, you find that there's so many rules and regulations. And in a good way, right? God has bumpers, just like we have guardrails in traffic, right? So I think the biggest thing coming into the church as a Catholic convert is, as you guys may or may not hear, go forth. The peace of the Lord be with you and with your spirit. And you proceed, right? But the truth of the reality is my peace didn't make it past the parking lot of the Mass. And I had to address that. And my husband at the time was like, you literally just told me you saw heaven and the saints, and now who are you? You're a witch at the end of it. And at first it was, well, I'm hungry, or it was, I was tired and now all of Mass zapped me, every reason. But what it came down to was, I don't want to say demonic possession. That's truly 1% of all exorcist ministry. But there were strongholds of pride that needed to be addressed, strongholds of lukewarmness. And I come from like pride and gambling and drinking. And so just plenty of spirits within just pride. And then there's sloth of like, oh, I should be comfortable. I need to be in bed a little bit more. So like I had to address the strongholds through prayer and fasting to have the peace that surpasses the parking lot of Mass, right? And so it wasn't until prayer and fasting to get delivered from that. I remember waking up one morning and I was like, yeah, I got full 8.5 hours, which that's a miracle by itself, guys. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old. That's literally unheard of. And then as I talked to God, begin my fast, I was like overwhelmed with sloth and just exhaustion. And I was like, Lord, what is going on? And the voice was very clear. God speaks to me audibly, and sometimes it's visions and stuff. But in this moment, he said, I need you to persevere. Don't get back into bed. You have good works to do today. And I said, okay, I did my best, but I was literally wanted to call out sick, wanted to be back in bed, all the things. And then 30 minutes before I ended my fast, God said, I deliver you from sloth. And I was almost like, what do you mean? How did I get this? And it wasn't just my parents' side, but it was very clear from my husband's side, depression, anxiety. And so I don't want to over spiritualize the spirit realm, but if you're a Catholic convert, that is something that needs to be heard, is you probably do have strongholds and snares and traps that you had no idea about. And then, like I said, this was before my husband was my husband. So I was living in sexual impurity and immorality. I want to take you to Galatians 5. Galatians chapter 5 is wonderful. It talks about the fruits of the Spirit and not fruits of the Spirit. And so that is a great one to kind of like cast yourself into what is and what isn't. So starting with verse 19, acts of the flesh are obvious, maybe not so obvious to those of us, but it's sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfishness, ambition, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, those that live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. Okay? So just taking that part for Lent and being like, what part of me do I see myself in this? And then fast accordingly from that. And I recommend this. I would say, I'm baptized. I decree and declare that I am baptized and I will not have fits of rage, right? So that's the spiritual fruit, is to practice that virtue for the day. 40 days is a long time. God, we're ready for Easter, aren't we? But then the fruits of the Spirit is love, joy, patience, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, faithfulness. And then I just encourage you, where are you thriving? Because God doesn't want to be like, look, you're just so ugly and filthy. That's why we need Jesus. But then also focus on like, well, where am I thriving? But where am I deficit? And so, again, just totally unloaded you guys.
No. And I think one of the important things to think about, right, is when it comes to the spiritual realm and how it is often imagined in the social imaginary of the West, of the United States here in 2026, it's like the threshold for something to be spiritual is very high. And so what I mean by this is, if it's going to be demonic, if it's going to be negative at all, it has to be scary. It has to be like all of this sort of rigmarole, and right. It's going to be it seemingly will be obvious, but what it mostly is, the demons don't have to work hard with humans, because we're awfully ready to listen to them.
Right.
And I think sometimes that is something missing in the United States Catholicism, is you have normal life and then it's only spiritual if it really hits this really high temperature. Yes. Instead of being like a daily thing where you're like, no, maybe the fact that like you got mad at an inanimate object is because something is season opening to dispel the peace of your spirit. Right.
So like road rage, we're all familiar with it, but is it Christ-like to, have the slew of words as you guys can fill the words, right? Or would it be more pleasing, because in spiritual warfare, and to have the virtue and the grace is to flip it around and be like, Lord, I bless that person. They may be going through something I don't know. Lord, you get them safely to wherever they need to go. They may have an important life meeting right now that I don't know about. And you say it out loud, it pisses the demons off. Oh my gosh, it make like the thoughts that go into that you wanted to say out loud, and then you go straight to worship and praising. The spirit of offense is so heavy in America. And I need to say it again. Being offended is that stops Christ's light from going into somebody's heart. So when we recognize that you're easily offended and you're not going to bless that person, every witchcraft, high warlock that converted to Christ, they will say, you need to bless them. And as Christians, I don't think we're blessing them during Easter and all the regular things, but we're not blessing in our day-to-day. like, Sandy could have pissed me off, but am I blessing Sandy? No, I'm probably not. I need to bless her. I need to bless her. And if I want peace in my workplace and someone's giving me such a hard time, speak peace and blessing over that person so it'll be returned unto you.
Yeah,
right?
and I think the thing that as we're getting ready to wrap up here is one thing that's important is like this is not being fakely happy or
Correct.
overly optimistic,
right.
And it's actually a battle. So when that person cuts you off on the road, you can feel very angry. That's just a human emotion to like be frustrated. What we're saying is that's the opening, that if you close it, that even in your sort of disappointment with that human, if you go, you know what, I'm angry at them, but bless them.
Yes.
That is the small wrestling match that can be won every day. We're not saying be fakely happy person, especially if that's not your thing.
Right.
But to know that, like, when that opening occurs, to like you said, to block
Slam
the
it.
shot
Yep.
of the demons.
Yes.
Well, look, this is fantastic stuff. Love having you on every time you get a chance. If people want to find out more about what you're up to, where do you want to direct them to?
Godstoddler.com, and I am a millennial, so I am on TikTok and then YouTube. Instagram is my last place. Facebook is not existent, but Godstoddler.com is the place to be. I try my best to do weekly posts to have heavenly nuggets.
Yeah, that's right. So this Wonder blog, so
Wonder
Heavenly
blog.
Nuggets,
Yeah.
so people always have a chance to look there. So one more time, Connie Hill, she's local, she's on the web, and she was here talking to us about the daily experience of spiritual warfare. Connie, thank you for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it very much.
Listen to the Catholic Morning Show weekdays at 7 a.m. Central on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, iowacatholicradio.com, or the Iowa Catholic Radio app.